Gen Z getting fired is not a surprise because we genuinely want to set standards. We understand how fucked up the system is, and we want to push back against what we think is normal and what so many generations before us have accepted for a lifetime, and genuinely look at that and we're like, nah, we don't want that.
New statistics. Do you know what % of Gen Z workers claim they experience burnout at work?
I get scheduled for 25 hours a week and literally about to quit.
Not 20%, not 40%, not 80%. Not 90%. 98% of you experience burnout.
Every single day, go and work somewhere and do that 5 times a week.
How? You're in your early 20s. Watch this. 23% face unmanageable stress and 48% feel drained. According to a Cigna survey, Gen Z is the most stressed generation of all time. And by the way, according to 1,000 leaders that are hiring people out there, watch what they said. This is employers talking about Gen Zers. 6 in 10 employers reporting firing recent Gen Z college graduates within months of hiring them. 1 in 7 employers indicated they may refrain from hiring new graduates next year's. Unsatisfactory performance. 75% of companies said some or all of their Gen Z hires were unsatisfactory. 50% reported that Gen Z workers showed a lack of motivation, and 39% of Gen Zs lacked communication skills. 46% noted a lack of professionalism.
Hi guys, welcome back to our channel. In case you're new here, my name is Maren
And I'm Maureen.
So today we're going to be reacting to an issue that has gone quite viral, and this was of a report of Gen Zs being fired from workforce. Now, this report was just talking about how Gen Zs can't keep work, or rather how the workforce does not want to hire Gen Zs. Right, and we ask ourselves, and we'll be asking you on the platform today, do you think this is fair to the Gen Zs?
Right.
Do you think employers are justified for feeling this way?
Right, you as parents watching us, you as brothers and sisters to Gen Zs watching us, or you as people who've encountered Gen Zs, do you think this is fair to them, or do you think it's time for the workforce to finally change on how it has been operating? Because right now I'm just seated here asking myself, what is the future of the workforce looking like?
Yeah, but guys, we don't want to talk a lot. This was going crazy on the internet, and we decided to bring it to you so that we can talk about it. Let's watch, and then we come back with our commentaries. Also consider subscribing if it's your first time here. Let's watch.
When I was younger, if you didn't like your job or if you didn't like your boss, the bad news was you had to stay there for a year, because if you left in anything less than a year, you would hurt your CV. They'd be like, why did you leave in under a year, you know? And now, particularly young people, there's no stigma to quitting, and it happens sometimes too quickly. Like, if you're confrontation avoidant, and I've seen it happen, I'm too afraid to ask my boss for a raise, so I just quit. Or I've been here for 4 months, I don't like the culture, I quit. Or I got in trouble at work, I hate my boss, I quit. I don't mind if something's super toxic, get the heck out of there. Most places are not super toxic. Imperfect, yes, but toxicity is like there's a standard, you know, and it's a high bar. Or this doesn't fit my values, or this disagree with my politics, I quit. My fear is that if we flash forward 5 years, there's going to be a disproportionately high number of people who have 8 jobs in 5 years. And what's going to happen is an employer is going to look at them and be like, I can't take the risk that you're going to stick around. I'm not hiring you. You sound like an amazing candidate, but you're too high risk for me.
Gen Z getting fired is not a surprise because we genuinely want to set standards. We understand how fucked up the system is, and we want to push back against what we think is normal and what so many generations before us have accepted for a lifetime, and genuinely look at that and we're like, nah, we don't want that. That being said, I think it's really important for Gen Z to embrace the fact that, especially when you're young, you need to learn skills that are ultimately going to set you up for your life, what you want to do, and support the life that you want. So while you may not agree with everything that corporation stands for, I personally don't, it is important to understand that at the end of the day, you are learning skills that's going to help set you up, and hopefully you give back to future generations that are in the positions that you are in today. And at the end of the day, you are replaceable, but please understand that it is in your best interest to give it your best shot, learn the skills, network with the right people, and set yourself up and your life for success.
Have y'all seen this article? It's okay though, because I clapped back with this article in Forbes. Let's address the root of the cause here. Gen Z just demands too much for you all, and instead of you all trying to actively make change and coexist with Gen Z, you're just writing us off completely and throwing us away. Honestly speaking, what is so hard about work-life balance? What is so hard about diversity? What is so hard about fair pay? I'm waiting. I think corporations need to realize that a lot of Gen Z started work during the middle of a pandemic. The workplace has changed drastically since then, okay? And we're just actively working to make it even better for all of us. What is so hard to realize about that? I just don't understand what doesn't click for other generations. I don't get it. Instead of writing us out completely, which is just a manipulation tactic to get us to conform, why don't we work on creating a safe space so that we feel heard, so that we feel seen, and maybe we can learn from each other? How about that?
Trouble for Gen Z in the workplace. Employers are reporting that this generation is the most difficult to work with.
You want to know what's funny? Come here. It's not that the new generation is more difficult to work with. It's that the older generation is more difficult to work for, right? Because in the article, it further explains that the newer generation is more difficult to work with, right? Because apparently they're easily offended. Get so close right now. I promise you it's the older generation that is more offended than anybody else. If you don't believe me, go to your boss and ask for a raise and watch how offended everybody gets, right? Or put in your 2-week notice and watch how personal your boss takes that, right? Another reason was apparently the new generation is untrustworthy. I promise you, during your job interview, when your boss says, we're like a family, and then you have to take a day off because it's a personal issue, watch them make you feel so guilty for doing so, right? And lastly, they said that the newer generation apparently are lazy. It's not that they're lazy. They're not getting paid enough to do more than what they're already hired to do. That's not called being lazy. That's called taking a stance and having standards.
There have been all these videos about how Gen Z is not good in the workplace and how they're getting fired at alarming rates and how people are trying to hire baby boomers over Gen Zs. It's so crazy because I feel like a few years ago, Gen Z brought up a lot of good points when it comes to working in corporate America. And I am like a millennial or zillennial, so like I'm right at the cusp. But I definitely align more with millennial in the workplace specifically, especially because of the expectations and what I knew the corporate world was going to be like and my exposure to it in college. I've worked alongside Gen Zs who aren't like at the college or corporate level, just like everyday people, and I can fully understand why these people are not hiring them. When I look online and I see most of the people who are talking about how they feel about the fact that companies are not hiring Gen Z, most of them are Gen Z, and the overwhelming reason as to why it's an issue is because there are issues in the workplace or there are issues in these places and people don't want to work with these outdated, ways of doing business. And I feel like that perfectly describes Gen Z in the workplace. This is a group of people who have not entered the workplace or who are just barely entering the workplace, and their reason for acting the way that they act is because it's a flawed system. How do you know it's a flawed system if you have never been in the system? You come into the system assuming it's flawed because it's not easy or it has some sort of difficulty that you don't want to experience. And rather than learning and adjusting and working with the environment which generations before you have learned to do, they didn't just wake up and decide, oh, I'm going to do corporate America this way. They've learned to work with these companies. So if you come into a space thinking, oh, I do this, so they do that. Oh, they said work starts at 9, therefore I can't come in from an 8:30 meeting because I have to go to the gym. Like, good luck. Working is not fair. You get fired, like you don't get raises, like it's not the judicial system, and even that is not. I would challenge y'all to think about these systems from the inside before you start judging them and assuming that they're messed up because they were made from a generation that was not you.
Breaking, Gen Z is being fired from their jobs in record time. 6 out of 10 companies in a survey from Intelligent.com said that they fired Gen Z workers months after hiring. Now wait, before you start to criticize Gen Z, you might remember that the Wall Street Journal recently did an article talking about how Gen Z was falling in love with corporate America. Whether you believe that or not, Gen Z is actually more likely to stay longer in their first few jobs than millennials were. So why are so many of them getting fired in record time? The answer has nothing to do with Gen Z at all. It's the economy. Gen Z is joining the workforce at one of the worst employment markets in recent memory. Companies are firing people left and right, they're finding ways to pay workers less, and in many sectors, jobs have just dried up altogether. Remember, the job market being so terrible is what prompted the Fed to cut rates by the highest amount that they had since the Great Recession in 2008. So Gen Z getting fired right after being hired is because of the crappy labor market. Companies are looking to fill entry-level positions with workers who have several years of experience, which is obviously putting Gen Z at a major disadvantage. Companies have also taken advantage of the tight labor market by firing entire divisions, renaming them, and then rehiring more experienced workers at lower salaries. So no, this phenomenon is not because Gen Z is lazy. On the contrary, many people have praised how engaged and driven they are. Remember, their push for change has made a lot of workplaces better. Everybody's just up against it right now because of this economy. As always, for more interesting and informative stories on tech, business, the economy, and jobs, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to my channel here and on Instagram and YouTube.
Don't hire Gen Z. They don't know what work actually means. Now hiring baby boomers only. Thanks.
I was on the Dr. Phil show, and it gets crazier. Companies and boomers around the country are not hiring Gen Z, and they're blatantly discriminating against them. Look at this sign. This was from the Dollar Tree, and since then, the manager has been fired. But she says, I apologize for closing again. My 2 new cashiers quit because they said their boyfriends couldn't stand here for their entire shift. Don't hire Gen Z. They don't know what work actually means. Now hiring baby boomers only. And this business owner just went on national television and said the exact same thing, that they don't even hire Gen Z anymore, and they won't hire Gen Z in the future. Of course, my first question was, isn't this illegal? The age discrimination laws on the book is called EEOC. It prohibits an employer from treating applicants and employees who are 40 and older differently. That's it. 40 and older are protected. And then we get national headlines like this. A Gen Z woman with 2 degrees breaks down in tears sharing the responses she received. She was going door to door, and she says, honestly, a little embarrassing because I'm literally applying for like minimum wage jobs, and some of them are being like, no, we're not hiring. And I'm like, what? This is not what I expected.
Hey folks, Asher Tech Bestie here. This creator here has a wonderful post that talks about an article that his father sent him stating that Gen Zs are getting fired at really high rates. And I want to just touch on this a little bit because I'm not going to get into the respectability politics of it. I think the post goes a little bit into that, as well as kind of like the expectations of Gen Z that have been given to generations that have come before them. But the expectation almost seems to be a lot more intense, just given the training and whatnot within some of these organizations are not sufficient for Gen Z. One thing is, I'm not the person to get on anybody about respectability politics. I think that that's a trash methodology or like idea that someone should present a certain way or like speak a certain way to be able to be hired someplace, etc. However, I do understand that there are rules of engagement within the professional space that I don't think are being handed down to our Gen Z well. I also think that there is a broadening gap when it comes to what organizations and employees are offering versus what people coming out of school and coming out of some of these internships have, where there's a large gap in the middle, larger than there has been previously. When I started working, there was very little training. And what I mean by working is not the earlier jobs that I had. When I started working at 12. And I started working at 12 at a water park and then eventually at an ice cream shop. And I was able to work that early because I got a worker's permit. I was going into high school. We can talk about that being problematic another time. But I started working very early in a W-2 type of state. The things that I learned early in my employment was from my mom. Like, my mom is the person who taught me, be on time to work, make sure when you get there your uniform looks clean and pressed, make sure that you are being respectable and have manners when you're talking to customers and to your elder leaders, etc. This was not something that was taught to me on the job. And in fact, there were a lot of people who were not taught these things at home and therefore got fired. Now, was it their responsibility to come into the job knowing that it is very impressionable to have manners when you're speaking to customers and treating people kindly and smiling when people walk in the door? We're not going to touch on that topic for cashiers, but smiling when people come in the door, no, that wasn't taught on the job. It was an expectation when I got hired that I was supposed to be hospitable because I worked in the hospitality industry. When I eventually made my way into tech, when I got to the job, I actually trained myself how to code. This was something that I had some baseline skills. When I got to the job, the person who hired me said the learning curve was going to be pretty steep, but they felt that I had the skill set to be able to learn on the job and do it. Now, was I sat down and shown what was supposed to happen when I got there? No. I had to figure that out on my own, by asking questions, by sitting with people that were working in the same role as me, by sitting in meetings, catching on, etc. The training that I think people think is out there is not real, and especially not real the more non-traditional and the more historically excluded that you are. These are things that come from legacy. These are things that come from who your parents are and what sort of businesses they have. I'm the first person in my family to ever work in tech. I'm the first person in my family to have a quote corporate job. And those things weren't taught to me. But what was taught to me was to be resilient, to ask questions, to be presentable, respectable, have manners, and to show up prepared. I'm not saying that Gen Zs are not taught those things. I do think that there is a different expectation on what is supposed to be had before they get to the building and within a job versus what is presented to them. Now, again, I did say that the issue is also on the employer side. Yes, learning and development programs are dropping. The time to train in some of these roles is getting less and less. The years of experience for some of these hires are very extensive. So when you're already asking 2 to 3 years for experience, that means somebody else has already trained you on the baseline skills of the role. I think we can all argue that each role has baseline skills. Now, how each individual company does them is wildly dependent on the company. And those are things that you almost have to learn by osmosis. There are very few programs set up where you're going to receive more than a few days of instructional, if even that. They might hand you a doc or a Google Doc with all the files that you need in there. They might show you where the templates are, but a lot of that is going to be around your ability to go out and find, ask the right questions, search, and get to know the organization. And then, of course, getting the feedback when you're in the role. So basically what I'm saying is I think that there is an intended responsibility for the employee to come to the table with baseline skills to be able to build up the knowledge that they need when they are actually employed by the company. Equally, I do think that organizations are just not showing up with the level of training that they've had in the past, and it also depends on who your managers or leaders are in that role as well. Whose fault is it? I think it's on both sides. I think that Gen Zs need to know that baseline skills are expected. And I think the resiliency needs to be built up enough. I'm not saying abuse needs to be tolerated, but I do think that some corners are cut without thinking further into, okay, well, maybe, we got hit with the layoffs of this year, and therefore I got fired after, doing all the right things. There's another video in me where we're going to talk about the things that people are asking are not the things that are going to present you as being the most equipped for the role. Because just getting tasks completed is very different than actually doing the job. And too often we need interpreters, especially corporate interpreters, to tell us that the work isn't just the things they're telling us to do. There's a lot of hidden work in corporate that does not get talked about, that is expected of you. And not only is expected of you, it's kind of the coded language that those folks, again, who have that legacy in corp that can clue them in to what the work really is, that gets them the promotions and the accolades and the acknowledgement that a lot of folks who don't come from a corporate background just don't know. So anyways, that's another video. Those are my 2 cents on the matter. Have a good day.
A new survey found that 12% of managers say that they fired a Gen Z employee during their first week of work. And they blame it on Gen Z just being too easily offended. But seriously, why would you fire someone the first week that you've hired them after a long interview process where you carefully vetted them? Wouldn't you get offended if your employer laid you off before you really even started to do any work?
Gen Zs are getting fired at alarming rates. My dad just sent me this article which talks about how 6 in 10 employers are already talking about firing the Gen Zs they hired only a couple months ago. I'm a Gen Z myself, so I thought this was really interesting. Especially because in the article it talks about a lot of the stuff that I talk about here on this platform. According to the article, here's a reason why a lot of the Gen Zs are getting canned. They come unprepared to do the job at hand. Blame whatever you want, but as I've said many times on this platform, just having the degree isn't enough. You can cheat your way through college and come out with no skills. Then when you get on the job, you're going to have a rude awakening. Number 2, genuinely not wanting to do the work. Gen Zs want to arrive late and leave early and do the absolute bare minimum and generally are very low initiative. It is unreasonable to expect a great work-life balance, high-paying job straight out of college. Number 3, being unprofessional and generally having very poor communication skills. How you look, talk, and act matter, no matter what job you're doing. If you're going to work, dress nice. Learn how to speak up, speak confidently, give firm handshakes. By the way, I do think that Gen Z faces unique challenges that a lot of other previous generations haven't. But every generation goes through unique struggles, so it's important for us as Gen Z to recognize them and try and improve upon them. So work hard during college, have realistic expectations when you get out of college, learn how to be professional and communicate effectively. And follow me for more content. Gen Zs are getting fired at alarming rates. My dad just sent me this article which talks about—
Oof, that's a brutal article, but I can see why some Gen Z are struggling at work. And the thing is, it has nothing to do with work ethic or their skills. The first reason, we all know Gen Z values authenticity, but I think they're too authentic and too direct. For example, us millennials, maybe even boomers, they know if you don't want to do something, you don't tell your boss, I don't want to do it. But I have heard some stories of Gen Z telling their boss straight up, no, I don't want to do it, find somebody else. There is value in you being direct, but there's a time and place for it. Early on into your career, it's a little hard to get away with that. A second factor that could be harmful for Gen Z is that they want something and they want it now. The whole climbing the corporate ladder, it's a little bit outdated information now, but at the end of the day, there is truth to it. If you want the high-paying job, if you want the great manager, if you want the work-life balance, sometimes in the beginning, you have to eat a little bit of shit to work your way up. But Gen Z, I don't blame them. They want it now, and sometimes it bites them in the ass.
So guys, welcome back. Let us know what you think about the videos we just played you, right? You know, one thing I have to acknowledge is that a lot is changing. Things are not as they used to be 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 5 years ago. Things are not the same.
Right, and to be quite fair, this the Gen Zs, this is a group of generation who watched their parents work so hard for very little pay, be mistreated at workplaces just because their daily breads depended on work. But right now, I do feel like Gen Zs have created ways to make money that I myself don't even understand. They make money without even having to go to work.
Yeah, another thing we have to acknowledge is the employment culture has really changed. The same way you would argue the employer's culture, they've really changed. What do I mean by this? Employment culture has changed in that, and employer's culture also has changed in that people don't exactly get hired by the merits they used to have back then. Right now, we have a lot of people who are well studied, yeah, but a degree does not merit whether whether you're gonna be hired or not. Right now, there's a lot of other different factors that people have to consider before hiring and also before accepting employment. Right now, there are people who literally can go, and when they're bargaining for the conditions after they're employed, someone will just tell you, when during my days off, I'm not gonna receive phone calls, from work, and they'll do exactly that. Is that what employers want? So a lot has really changed.
Let's just say right now, a lot of Gen Zs know how to take their stand, and this might be stemming from the fact that they don't want to be mentally exhausted by negativity. But millennials and boomers can argue that Gen Zs have not been well equipped for the real life out there. That's why they are so soft and they don't compromise when a situation seems like it's not working on their favor.
Right.
So I don't know. I feel like to some
there's
extent,
a clash of generations going on.
Right, and to some extent, it's very true. Gen Zs have grown up in a soft life. When you compare to what millennials had to go through when they were growing up, they've grown up in a soft life.
The generations and the generations before that.
Right.
So guys, I feel like I have a personal story that we'd like to share on this matter. So let's just say there's somebody who was explaining how right now there are people who are not willing to take should we say
disrespect
exactly,
or
yeah, and if you negotiate for something, if it delays, for example, if your salary delays, you're gonna
by
either
just one day,
you're gonna bring hellfire on that organization, or you're gonna end up quitting because you don't tolerate BS. In short, people are not afraid of quitting or losing jobs
or asking for their salaries as they were a long time ago.
Right now, people are not afraid of confronting their boss. Whether it's a good or a bad thing, it depends on the outcome, right?
Right, because I feel like today's generation, most people think if someone is delaying with your salary and you don't speak up, that will breed room for disrespect, and it will breed room for that person to continue treating you like that and misusing you without paying you adequately.
Yeah, so personally, we've lost jobs, we've quit from jobs because of that. I remember there was a place where we went to work, and how we had agreed
we were supposed to be paid weekly,
right? And so this woman, when it came time, we only spent 1 week in that organization, and they didn't pay. When we asked, we were told that we just need to keep on working.
They will pay later.
They will pay later. So in Kenya, if somebody does that, you might end up working for a whole year without even getting paid. So if you don't take care of it, you're gonna end up being the one losing.
Right. So what we naturally did was, if someone is having working back on your contract, it's just been a week of you working there, and they can't even fulfill their obligation in the first week. It speaks a lot to the pattern that will follow if you stay there.
Right.
And I feel like this is the model that the Gen Zs are working with.
You wouldn't be able to speak for everyone. At least us, we quit after 1 week for that reason, right? And it wasn't anything else, just the fact that you were working back on your word after we had agreed after every week, you know. So if you can't pay us for the first week that you had agreed on, what was gonna obligate you to pay for the rest of the month, you know,
or the year.
Anyway, so that's that. Another thing, another place we worked at, they were paying us, but we felt like the amount for the amount of work we were doing, that amount was too little, you know. And this person kept on giving us work, which is not a problem. We really pulled our end. They used to see results and they were happy. So we waited to such a level where we knew they depended on our skills because we are that good. And I'm not bragging, we deliver our own part. So this person depended heavily on us, and they kept on adding more work to us, and the amount of money wasn't going up. It was just the constant amount. So we ended up doing everything, and we felt like, no, this is taking advantage of somebody and using somebody's labor in a bad way. So we talked to the person, and we told the person, you know, for what you're paying us, we don't think it matches with the work, therefore we'd like to revisit the payment, right? And the person was like, yeah, I'm gonna increase the salary, but they weren't serious about it. So we ended up quitting. And so when we were quitting, it's when they're coming back and telling us,
I'll give you this amount. Now they were mentioning, I'll give you this amount, but at the time we had just clocked off.
We were done with the job, and so we ended up quitting, you know. So this is what I'm saying. Some things you have to consider, but what does it mean for the future of workforce industry?
Right. I feel like also employers will just have to conform to the changing times, because most of them have not changed much.
They'll have to make changing.
They'll have to make workforces or workplaces very friendly. They just look at what employees right now are looking for: that safety, that comfort, and most especially, just mental health is very important to people nowadays. Unlike a while back, people didn't used to talk about their mental issues.
And then, you know, there's something that somebody once said, guys. Somebody once said, if you want to know where the money is, and if you want to make good money, look at where the young generation is populated. What are they gravitating towards? That is where money is. Why am I saying this? Right now, social media became such a huge thing, and there's a lot of people who are making money because of it. Be it hiring influencers or online marketing team for them to push their products. Like literally, the digital industry has really grown because of this, and people have earned good profits because of this, you know. So either ways, that is where the world
and I also feel like the employment demography is changing because right now Gen Zs are looking for alternatives from employment.
If they can be self-employed, the better, you know.
Yeah, so they're looking for alternatives from self-employment because most of them don't like being ordered, and at workplaces you can be ordered,
really ordered around.
Right.
Anyway, guys, let us know what you think about this episode in the comment section, and we want to thank you as usual for catching this one. Let's catch you on our next. Remember to subscribe if it's your first time here.